I'm nowhere near where I wanted to be at this age.
I think in this era of social media, it's so easy to feel behind.
If you feel like you're hitting that quarter-life crisis right now, like you have no idea what you want to do with your life, but you sure as hell know it's not what you're doing right now, let me tell you why that feeling is a good thing.
December, every sign has its own mode. I was in love with the Sagittarius.
From the Diving Board is a show hosted by me, Charlie Chats, dedicated to decoding digital culture by unpacking the hidden politics behind the screen. Guys, are you seeing this? Oh my god. We have a professional setup and two hands. You have no idea how difficult it has been for me to speak with one hand. I mean, actually, you probably have had an idea because I feel like I've made it kind of obvious that I speak with like one of my hands. Like sometimes when I'm editing and I have to go like really quickly through the footage, I'll just see the one hand like going crazy. And I'm like, how is anyone able to concentrate? Like this is a lot. But now that I have two hands to work with, it should all be fine. Also, welcome back. It's actually been so long. I think the last time I filmed was an entire month ago. Big things have happened, including the fact that I hit 25. I turned 25, guys. My frontal lobe is fully developed and I've been thinking about it ever since. And I ended up writing a piece on Substack actually because I feel like the period leading up to turning 25, it's all just a lot. There's a lot of expectations. There's a lot going on. Everyone's saying you're in your quarter life crisis. I'm then sitting there like, am I in it yet? Was I supposed to feel something when I turned 25? Can you feel the biological shift when your frontal lobe develops? I understand you can't. I don't know. Like maybe you can. Maybe some people can. I don't know. I didn't. By the way, I didn't. It was a lovely birthday, don't get me wrong. Had a lovely time, but there was nothing tangibly different about my life from being 24 to 25, except for the expectation that some life change was going to happen. I really wanted to unpack what this whole quarter life crisis even means in a modern day context because I do see it thrown around a lot. This is not a novel topic in the slightest, but because of my recent personal experience in relation to it, I was like, oh, go on then. Gotta get my thoughts out there too, guys. So that's what I did. Let's get into the video and unpack some of my findings about what a quarter life crisis is, who tends to experience quarter life crises, whether or not they're even that bad, or if they're potentially a good thing in disguise. So let's go. Let's get into it.
Every sign has its own mode. I was in love with the Sagittarius. See the emotions he put me through. From Capricorn to Aquarius. They all got their different minds.
As you start to approach 25, which I'm hyper aware of, you start to hear about the quarter life crisis a lot. And it's not so much like hearing about the quarter life crisis. It's more just that every single behavior and experience suddenly is framed through that lens. So if you decide to change your job or change friendship groups or move to the other side of the world or decide to do something that you weren't expecting to do, all of these things are suddenly indicative of a crisis and not just a major life change. And I find this really interesting because if I was doing these things or making these changes at say aged 40 or say aged 18, it wouldn't be framed in the same light. We wouldn't be like, oh, a quarter life crisis is here. Like, oh, change is obviously a very big part of the quarter life crisis, I would say, because it comes at this time in your life where your life has been so structured to a particular point. Usually you've been living with your family, you've been institutionalized through school or university for a lot of people, you've been working in particular jobs that lend a certain lifestyle, and then suddenly you hit this point in your life, granted it's not necessarily going to be 25, but you hit this point where your life is no longer so structured. Even if you didn't go to university and you're not graduating around this time, I do think that because so many people in their mid-20s are doing so many different things, you can no longer sort of look around you and compare your life compared to, say, your peers and your friends around the same age. I feel like when I was 18, 19, 20, I could very much go on Facebook or Instagram and like see what my school peers were doing, and we were all doing very similar things. We were doing very similar jobs, like working in hospitality or studying or doing an apprenticeship. Lots of similar things that you could easily compare yourself to. Whereas when you get to your mid-20s, you've got like some friends getting engaged and getting pregnant, like intentionally pregnant. That's so different to like early 20s or whatever. And then other friends are like partying, traveling the world, doing whatever. And other friends, again, are focusing very, very heavily on their careers. But I think that that's like all already such a stark difference. And it kind of reminds us at this age that the world is so open to many of us. There are so many different paths that we can take. And for me in particular, I found that openness of opportunity really, really difficult to deal with, because it's like so many people are doing so many different things that I don't know where I fit, and I can't figure out what I'm supposed to be doing because I can't just compare myself to what my friends are doing and what my school peers are doing anymore. When I was doing this research, I came across this article in The Atlantic by Maggie Mertens. She talks about how so many people in their mid-20s at the moment are doing marathons and half marathons. And she frames it as part of this new quarter life crisis, particularly when the traditional markers of your mid-20s, like having the house, having a family, being kind of well and truly into your career, they're not accessible for us anymore because of so many different things, including the cost of living crisis, which I'm going to go into a bit later. But because of this, we're seeking other things that are quite significant, but weirdly more achievable, and they include things like marathons. I think if you were to ask me like 5-10 years ago what would be something you'd see yourself do in your mid-20s, I don't think I would necessarily be saying a marathon. Like, I would almost say that seemed to me 5 to 10 years ago more difficult to achieve than purchasing a house, having a family, a good career would be. We're living in this strange situation where that's not the case. There are so many different running groups and things now, and it's almost like a social thing as well. It's got like ties to being social. It's also like a dating scene. Like, these run clubs are literally like Bumble and Hinge. Like, I'm literally that friend where like if my friend is single, I'm like, please tell me everything. Tell me the drama. I need to know. I need to know. And if you came to me with a running club love story drama, oh my God, I would be eating that shit up. Pretty much half of my friendship group did this. Pretty much half my friendship group started training for a marathon. I feel like a few years ago it was very much weightlifting was on trend. Running was not the vibe. And now we are all running. We're all running. What are we running from? Anyway, she says, Maggie Mertens says, when other big life milestones seem elusive, a marathon, though extreme, can feel like a surer route to finding meaning. If you stick to your training plan, this is a goal that you can actually achieve. But I could clearly yap about this till the cows come home, if that's the saying. But I wanted to know actually what a quarter life crisis means in scientific terms. Sorry, scientist over here, the girl who didn't do science in year 12. Anyway, I found a study. Dr. Robinson from the University of Greenwich essentially defines the quarter life crisis as this period of kind of open-ended angst, and he splits it up between two different crises. Dr. Robinson says you can have a locked-in crisis or a locked-out crisis, and he uses the analogy of this woman named Mary, who he actually did follow on a longitudinal study for 4 years as she graduated university and then the 4 years after. Unfortunately for Mary, she went through both crises. When I read this story, I was like, oh, I relate to you, like support for Mary, justice for Mary. Essentially, it went a bit like this. So first of all, when Mary graduated university, she faced a locked out crisis. So once she finished her university degree, she wanted to get a job that she kind of had been promised by the system in a sense. But after countless applications, again, so relatable, she was facing a lot of rejection, and it felt like this promise that she could receive this particular job after just putting in the hard yards at university, it felt like this whole thing was kind of crumbling in her face. And she was like, what am I supposed to do now? I feel really locked out of this world that I'm supposed to be very much in right now. And I really like the way that Dr. Robinson describes this, because it doesn't just apply to academia or careers at all. It's basically like when you've put all of this positive energy into this goal that you see yourself having at a particular life stage, your mid-20s, and then the system and life isn't giving you any return. You're feeling this like massive disappointment and rejection, which leads to a lot of self-esteem loss as well. But here's where it gets interesting. Once Mary eventually did get the job, she, I guess, was kind of accepted into the system, and she was like, okay, that was shit, but we're moving on now. I'm part of it. We can all relax. The job sucked. Oh my God. I particularly related to the locked-in crisis. So this is her locked-in crisis. She has this job that she feels like she's worked so hard to get, and her boss is awful. Her boss was bullying her, which, as a side note, if you have a bullying boss, it is never worth staying. And I totally understand why you would in certain circumstances like this, because for Mary, she'd worked so hard for this job that she started convincing herself that she actually did want it. She was like, I can't be just leaving this behind. I've worked so hard. I'm just going to put on a facade and pretend that I'm all fine. She was feeling very locked into this life because she didn't want to leave. Because if she left, what does that mean? Like, does that indicate that the past however many years of study and however many years of trying to get the job, does that mean that that's just totally redundant? Now, I'd like to ad-lib in here. I don't think Dr. Robinson talked about this, but I'd like to advise if you are in that situation, it's also advice for myself. Something like a topic I really like is the sunk costs fallacy. Essentially, it suggests that a lot of us do live by that kind of mindset. We've put in so much effort for a given goal that we feel like we have to do the goal, even if we realize when we meet the goal, it's not what we want to do. And so we just stick with the goal because we're like, well, we've already put, say, X number of years of study into this goal. I can't leave this now. Like, I have to do this. That's just really silly. It's a fallacy because if you do continue along those lines in a career or a path that you don't like, then you're losing even more years. I feel like that's a very common mentality for people in their mid-20s in particular, particularly in relation to careers, I would say. But essentially what Dr. Robinson is getting at here is that the quarter-life crisis has a lot to do with our expectations around what adulthood is supposed to look like. And when we don't meet those expectations, that's when we start to feel this friction and face difficulties in our own mental state. But this ultimately led me to question what actually leads to our expectations around adulthood. If I think about when I grew up, we've been told since we were like 14 that the avocado toast brunch and coffee dates that we were having out was going to prevent us from buying a house. I don't think I ever grew up thinking that I would be a parent in my 20s, which is not so much due to expectations around finances, but more because both of my parents didn't become parents until they were in their mid to late 30s. I don't think many of my generation or most of my generation really did expect to see these like traditional markers of adult success, air quotes. I wanted to unpack this and figure out like what is it that we're expecting? Why do we still expect these things? Of course, it didn't take me long to take us back to the internet, digital online culture. Hello, finally, we're only 20 minutes in. Actually, I don't know how long we're in because I probably edited all my yapping down. Online self-improvement culture. It has a lot to speak about, at least the modern day quarter life crisis. Social media is filled with stuff telling you that you suck. It's basically just a page of ads that tell you that you're not fit enough, not clean enough, not beautiful enough. You don't have the right career. You don't have enough experience. You don't have enough friends, etc. I don't need to keep repeating. I'm sounding like I'm bullying you. All of these problems can apparently be fixed by the product that's being sold to you when that same company is telling you that you suck. Isn't that such a coincidence? Wow, I can't believe that you're telling me that I'm not beautiful, but if I did buy your Goop, whatever the hell it is, I would be beautiful? Okay. Sign me up. In a really great Substack piece on the quarter life crisis and online self-improvement culture, talks about this idea that you feel like you are constantly having to keep up with everything. And if you don't keep up, then like you're not good enough. You need to be constantly knowledgeable about everything that's going on in the world on top of your everyday life obligations. And she calls this capitalism's trap. She says, when not working, we need to be working on ourselves, listening to podcasts while doing the dishes, using Blinkist to read a whole book on your commute, and wear wrist weights while shopping for groceries to tone your arms. I've never seen anyone do the last one, but I have actually seen, side note again, a lot of people wearing ankle weights again, which really reminds me of 80s and 90s athleisure, which I found kind of interesting because I'm like, I feel like I would never think to pull out the ankle weights. But is that like a new beauty trend? Is this part of the Pilates body beauty trend? Oh my God, so much to unpack there as well. Wow. Anyway, I digress. When I was reading her piece though, I actually laughed out loud when she said something along the lines of like, imagine trying to explain the book Atomic Habits to your ancestors. I just really don't think they cared so much about self-improvement culture and like self-optimization hacks and like tactics and stuff. Like that was just so ridiculous to me. On the topic of self-optimization, of course, I like caveat here that it's not all bad. In fact, it can be really healthy to be constantly thinking about how you can do better and be a better person, because ultimately when you're a better person, you're better for those around you and you're better for society. But I think that it's the way in which self-optimization is being packaged in this consumerist and capitalist context. It's not like these companies that are trying to sell you stuff to make you a better person are actually caring about like how you relate to others in the world, your level of empathy, like your connection with your friends and family. No, they just want money. Something that's really interesting when it comes to all this is the fact that Gen Z actually take up 60% of all TikTok users. And we're feeling pretty unfulfilled in comparison to other generations, according to studies done by McKinsey and Company. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that these two things are causally related. They might just be correlated. But I do think it's interesting to point out that we are on apps like TikTok, which do push so much product, so much consumerism on us, and so many messages of like self-optimization and also beauty optimization. And yet we're also not feeling fulfilled. Like I think we can comfortably say that this type of messaging is not helping us when it comes to genuine happiness levels. I think another big thing in relation to this topic and levels of fulfillment is loneliness. And I think to caveat what I just said, I actually did include in my loneliness video a whole section on why social media isn't necessarily the enemy here. And I think that you should definitely check that out after this video, because I kind of go into like how social media has supported me and my relationships and my feeling of connectedness, but it really has to be like done in a particular way, I would say. These self-optimization products like Bloom Greens and LED face masks and snake oil, they're all being marketed to us to tell us that they are going to fix all of our problems, and that if they don't work, then it's fine. Just move on to the next best thing and it'll all be okay. And the problem with this is that when they inevitably don't work, I mean, okay, sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's going to be great, but I don't think it's really going to fulfill you as a whole individual. And so when they inevitably don't change your life to the degree that is maybe promised to you, it makes you feel like you're the problem and not the system and not the marketing. And another huge part of this whole culture is that everything becomes measurable. Like everything is a metric. Even I found like when I started running, because I did join the bandwagon, I did download Strava, I know everything is measurable, everything is data. And while this can be really great when you're trying to achieve a goal, like running a marathon and you can track heart rate, like this type of trackable data has literally changed a lot of people's lives in the health space. It's also a profound reminder, if you're not achieving your goals, you're not achieving your goals. And for people who are perfectionists like moi, this is not always the best healthiest thing to do. In an article I recently read by New York Times, I believe, it was said, "It's no longer enough to imagine our way to a better state of body or mind. We must now chart our progress, count our steps, log our sleep rhythms, tweak our diets, record our negative thoughts, and then analyze the data, recalibrate, and repeat." In their book entitled Desperately Seeking Self-Improvement, A Year Inside the Optimization Movement, authors Carl Cederstrom and Andrew Spicer argue that the constant striving for self-improvement creates a similar feeling to consumerism. It's an itch that can never really be scratched. It's kind of like when you go to the shops and you know you want to buy something, but you don't really know what you want to buy because you want that dopamine rush. Cederstrom and Spicer write, "In a consumerist society, we are not meant to buy one pair of jeans and then be satisfied. And the same, they think, is true of self-improvement. We're being sold the need to upgrade all parts of ourselves all at once, including parts that we didn't even previously know needed upgrading. There's a great deal of money to be made by those who diagnose and treat our fears of inadequacy." Something that I found really interesting when I was looking at this is how it kind of relates in my mind to neoliberal feminism, which I spoke about in a recent video as well in relation to girlhood and girl culture and like that girl trends. And I think that this can tie quite neatly in here, because I would say recently when we did see a lot of the like that girl trend on TikTok and clean girl aesthetic, it was all related to this particular type of woman, usually young woman, who was presenting in a very feminine, very naturally beautiful, very classy, air quote, way, which aligned with the old money aesthetic and honestly quite a conservative gender norm way of presenting a woman, I would say. And it doesn't give you much room to like be messy or, you know, make mistakes or do things in a way that aren't like dramatically gender essentialist. And I think this does relate because a lot of the time these clean girls, can't believe I'm calling people clean girls, but you get the vibe. A lot of the time the same influencers that were promoting this particular trend were also promoting a very particular lifestyle that was very aligned with like productivity, eating really healthy, being really fit, hitting all these goals. They were usually very slim, very health conscious, very productively focused. The mindset was very much a capitalist one. And I'm not blaming the people who aligned with this like aesthetic. I think that's probably a very healthy way to live. But I do think that that is a very interesting trend in this context for a lot of young women, because it aligns with this topic of neoliberal feminism, which essentially kind of argues that there is a particular branch of feminism, so to speak, that is very capitalist in nature, and that in order to better yourself as a woman, better yourself as a feminist, you have to continuously buy into things to improve yourself, to be able to do it all. This whole notion of the girl boss as well is then tied into that concept as well. While I do still want to believe that women can do it all, of course we can do it all if we want to do it all, the system isn't designed to support us to do it all. So it means we end up doing way more and then burning ourselves out. I feel like to give further depth to what I'm talking about here, I was listening to a really interesting podcast the other day with Sarah Jane Adams, and she was interviewing Michelle Battersby on girl boss culture. Now, Michelle Battersby was very involved in Bumble. She kind of brought Bumble to Australia, was very heavily involved in the whole Bumble Australia market, very successful woman, and very much was a traditional girl boss in that sense, like the mid 2010s, 2016 power suit, girl boss vibe, the whole Sophia Amoruso thing. She was part of that. She was like our Australian version. And she actually speaks about it in this recent podcast. She kind of brings it back to now, and she says that the whole concept of a girl boss has just been repackaged and redesigned. It hasn't left us completely. Like, we might look back on those power suits and be like, oh my God, that was so like of its time. Girl boss culture of that time was kind of like stepping into your man. To be a successful woman, you still had to very much uphold the patriarchy and patriarchal values. Anyway, she goes on to talk about like modern trends, and she talks about the way that for men, generally speaking, micro trends just don't exist. Like in our current modern day, we've got trends like clean girl, that girl, but then women also have these micro trends like rat girl and messy girl. And I was really thinking about this because it almost gives us this opportunity to express ourselves beyond what's expected of us. Like, we have these expectations so frequently of like being the clean girl, being this organized, productive, self-optimization person. But then we have these tiny little micro trends like rat girl, where it's like, oh, okay, it's actually fine to show my disgustingly dirty room sometimes. I'll do it in like this cute way. That's hilarious. Haha, we can laugh about it. But it doesn't really do much. Like, it's kind of sad that we feel like we still have to use these trends to be able to express ourselves beyond what's expected of us in this kind of more like conformist notion of like self-optimization culture and womanhood, to be able to lean in. To bring this all back to the quarter life crisis, you thought we'd never get that, but we did. We brought it. We're coming back full circle, I promise. We're being informed basically covertly every day that we're not enough. If you don't fit to this particular standard of person, if you don't do these things that we're seeing so frequently online, you're not constantly self-optimizing, then you're already on the back foot. This doesn't necessarily have much to do with the quarter life crisis until you realize that for the last 4 or 5 years, while TikTok's been like quite significantly in our realm and online culture has been quite significantly pushing these self-optimization culture trends, I suppose, we have been already conditioning ourselves to compare ourselves against others before we even hit 25, a lot of us. And so it's kind of sad in a way, because it's like, well, maybe my quarter life crisis isn't hitting so badly because I'm so used to this line of thinking already. To be honest though, it would be completely naive to not talk about the cost of living crisis in relation to the quarter life crisis, because this is a huge part of this and it interrelates with self-optimization culture as well. This whole idea that self-optimization culture means we have to buy into it means that we're also already on the back foot, because we're buying all of these products to fit the standard of what we're expected to look like and to be according to like online trend standards. How the hell are we supposed to also buy a house when we don't have like the financial support and social welfare systems? Like, there is a rental crisis particularly in Australia, but also I would say almost all over the world, there's a rental crisis right now. Groceries are so expensive that food has become a luxury. We're already on the back foot, and I think this is a huge part as well. Even if a lot of us don't expect in our 20s to actually buy a house, we're struggling to even enjoy our 20s, a lot of us. For many of us who are taking on additional jobs right now, we might even be studying but working full-time to support ourselves, or part-time as well, which is really, really common here in Australia. It's just hard to just sit back and relax and enjoy. Like, how do you have time to ponder about a crisis when you're constantly working to try and pay the bills? We're losing light. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to wrap this up. I also just wanted to put some statistics out there in relation to Gen Z and like our cost of living experience when it does come to things like houses, because I know we've like heard it all before. It's something that a lot of people say, but I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, just get over it. And I found this recent statistics that came out from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Stagnant wage growth, as well as current record high house prices and demand, means that the average age of a first home buyer is now 36, with 54% of millennials owning their own properties and the average mortgage being 8 times an annual salary. Now, compare this with boomers. 65% owned a property when they were between the ages of 25 and 39, and the average mortgage was just 3 times the annual salary. So boomers, don't come for me. Don't tell me that we have it easier, because I've been hearing a lot of this and I don't want to hear it anymore. Before we do move on, chuck a gender pay gap in there. Yep, that still exists. And we've got some serious work to do. Okay? I'm talking about this very lightly because it pisses me off. So I want to like move on really quickly, but I feel like there's so much to unpack there. So I'm going to leave some more like documents down below and also potentially go into this in a later video in more depth. I'm just not feeling like I have the percentage on my camera, the light, and the mental capacity to do it in this episode today. But okay, we've got issues with cost of living, we've got issues with self-optimization culture, but something that I think is maybe overlooked sometimes, or maybe almost just too blatantly obvious to give airtime, is aging. Obviously, quarter life crisis, this is under the whole premise and assumption that we're all going to live to 100. Now, a very quick Google search does not suggest this in the slightest. In fact, I was looking at the World Health Organization statistics for life expectancy average globally, and it's more like 70. I think in 2019 it was about 73, and then the pandemic pushed this down to 72, and I haven't seen statistics since, but I'd say we're around that age group. Then chuck in the fact that obviously different countries have different levels of welfare, different access to healthcare, different levels of education, different wealth profiles in general, different resources, social welfare schemes and policies that allow access for different people to access all of these different systems. And there's a massive correlation between all of these things and life expectancy as well. Then look within countries themselves and how marginalized groups and people who exist at intersections of marginality do not have access to as much healthcare, as much education, so many different barriers to accessing the systems and dynamics that would allow a longer life expectancy. And we have a very unequal situation going on here. So the idea that we're going to live to 100 is an extremely privileged idea and notion, and therefore the idea of a quarter life crisis is also extremely privileged. And so I was looking into this idea, and obviously quarter life crisis is kind of more of a modern term, but the notion of the midlife crisis actually came out in the 50s, I believe. I'll get the statistics up because it was really, really interesting to find out like who coined this idea and where it came from. Because surprise, surprise, it was a white guy. Yeah, okay, I found it. So in 1957, a physician by the name of Jacques basically came out with this study. It's actually quite funny. He came out with this study where he was like, there was this patient, unnamed patient, that went to go and see their psychologist in their 40s, and they were experiencing questioning of their place in the world, and they were talking about kind of how the last 40 years of their life had felt like an uphill climb, and then now they'd reached this kind of peak. They were at this changing point in their life, and now they were kind of walking more leisurely down the hill. Paraphrased. He later said that this patient didn't exist because the patient was him. So the entire concept is based on him. And something else really interesting about this dude is that he actually ended up going into a completely different area of research afterwards. And when his whole idea of the midlife crisis, this topic really took off in popular culture, he wanted nothing to do with it. He was like, no, guys, look at my other research. So that's interesting, slightly telling. Like, what does that mean? Because as it turns out, there was an entire organization set up called Midas. I think it was Midlife in the US. Makes sense. They were dedicated to researching people in their 40s and 50s. They found that only 10 to 20% of people in the US actually experience anything similar to a midlife crisis. So there's this idea that perhaps the whole term and concept is very much inflated and is more a cultural concept rather than a scientific one. But something really, really notable, and where I'm getting at here, is from this article in The Atlantic, which talks about the midlife crisis. Classic sufferers of the midlife crisis were white, professional, and male, with the leisure time to ruminate on their personal development and the means to afford sports cars and mistresses. People who were working class or black weren't supposed to self-actualize, and women were assumed to be on a completely separate schedule set by marriage, menopause, and when their children left home. So not to end on that note, but I do think it's really interesting that the midlife crisis and quarter life crisis by default are both actually really privileged concepts. Like the idea that you have time to ponder about where you're going in life, what direction you want to take in life, the idea that you're spoilt with options is in fact a significant privilege to be able to shift and change. And not only to ponder the change, but to be able to act on the change. So many people don't even have time to think about this, don't even have time to ruminate on this. I don't know. I'm not trying to minimize the feelings that people have because they are very real. Like as we saw with Dr. Robinson's study of Mary, it's very real feelings, and not to invalidate those feelings at all, but to put it into a bit more of a perspective and how like this crisis can be such an opportunity for change and growth and difference in your life if you have the capacity to make those changes. Final personal thoughts on the quarter life crisis. I'm pretty ambivalent about it now, I would say. Once I get more research about it, understand it more, understand the feelings I'm supposed to be feeling, I'm like, okay, this is all right. I think we'll make it. I think we'll push through. But just know that if you are experiencing these feelings, they are so valid. I feel you. I get it. You'll find a way. Mary found a way, so we'll all find a way. So trust in Mary. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be posting more. I've also started posting on a new TikTok page, which I'll have linked in the description. And I've also always got my Instagram as well. If you're listening on Spotify, please give this episode a 5-star rating because it really helps my podcast to be discovered. And a bit of a shout out and a massive thank you to the podcast listeners on Spotify. We hit 10,000 streams the other day. I think we're almost at 13,000 as well. We're almost at 13,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I just want to say a massive thank you. Thank you for your support. It means the world to me. It's just so cool that I get to research topics that I'm interested in and then share them with you guys. That's literally what I do with my besties. So you guys are my besties. Okay, let's stop doing this now. We got to stop talking. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.